You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. How are you? Welcome to the show. I'm excited to introduce you to Jenna Altman. She is a health and fitness coach and the CEO and head coach at Harvest Coaching. Jenna is also the host of the Mindset, Metabolism, and Movement podcast. Her mission is to help active women find a healthy lifestyle that they can consistently show up for and to help them make decisions that align with their values and their bodies. And as you can probably assume, this did turn into a bit of a, guess what, coaching session. Woo-woo. Today, Jenna and I do discuss her story, why she got into this work, and her personal journey of development, particularly as it relates to nutrition, health, and fitness. We discuss anxiety, the benefits of therapy, and the power of working with a coach. Jenna also shares the pillars of her coaching program, which are mindset, metabolism, and movement. And while, as you can imagine, we were heavy on the mindset talk, we did get into metabolism and movement in a way that I don't really think I've discussed yet on the show. So that was pretty cool. And before we get to Jenna, I want to remind you that if you like what you hear on this show and want to support it, please go to buymeacoffee.com/sasssays to buy me a coffee, because Lord knows I need it. All right, here's Jenna. Hey, Jenna. So nice to finally meet you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christy. I'm really excited to be here. We've rescheduled a couple of times that we were just laughing about, and I think for a good purpose. There's a part of a story that needed to be told today, and I think that that's on purpose. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, we did. We had a nice little minute chat there about this, that for whatever reason, my listeners know these shows end up being coaching sessions for me, and there's something that you've got to share that I needed to hear, particularly today. Yeah, we'll see what it is. We'll figure it out together. Yeah. All right. So Jenna, you are the CEO and head coach at Harvest Coaching. Why don't you just share a little bit about why be the CEO and head coach at Harvest Coaching? What got you into this work?
Yeah, I love that question. Like asking me why that instead of like, tell me more about that, but like why?
Yeah.
I think that yields for a better response in general as to the work that I do. And I am technically a health and fitness coach, and I own my own coaching business. And I originally got into this because, like many of us, I have struggled with my weight. I've struggled with body image. I've struggled with finding an exercise routine that I enjoyed and all of the things that come along with trying to find a healthy lifestyle. And so going through that process on my own led me to this point where I just really wanted to know and learn more and have the knowledge and skills and tools to be able to do it in my own life, and then to be able to support others through that process as well. And so really that's where it kind of started from. I knew that the work that I wanted to do in my life was to be able to help others. I think a lot of us would say that. But this has been one of those avenues that has allowed me to do that at the depths that I truly can. And I really love this work. So yeah, that's why.
All right. Going back now to, doing the work on your own, as you said, like, how did you actually do that by yourself? Like, this is really hard, I think, personal, deep, challenging, emotional work at its core. I think fitness, body, health is all actually so emotional. And I'm curious how, well, it's okay. So I'm curious how you did it on your own and like what you actually did, but also what prompted you to know that you needed to do the work?
Yeah, this is such a beautiful question because, like you said, it is multifaceted, right? And it is the inner work and the deeper work is absolutely part of health and fitness, even though sometimes it might not feel that way because we can get very aesthetics and performance focused.
Mm-hmm.
But I always wanted more. I was always searching for more connection to myself, connection to my body. But when I first started, the focus was purely aesthetics, and I achieved those goals, and I did it in a very unhealthy and unsustainable way. And that is what led me to being at, honestly, the brink of, I need to do the deeper work. Like there
Mm-hmm.
was no more just like going through the motions, running 5 miles a day, eating barely anything. Like that just was no longer working for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, there has to be another way. Now, that said, how I got there in that process, like I said, was unhealthy and unsustainable, but also I didn't have the resources that we have now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to listen to a podcast and hear people's stories on how they maybe struggled through similar things. People weren't talking about that at the time. People were talking about losing weight and getting healthy and go hard, go big or go home. Like that's the messaging that I was receiving. So at that time, it felt really hard to kind of process and decide what steps to take. And so I took the most like, I'll never forget, I had this book. I think I still own it. I think I still have it, but it was like a workout book from like Women's Health. And I just did like exercises from that book and started getting like into strength training for the first time. While simultaneously just running, because that's a very accessible exercise, right? You can go outside, you don't need equipment. I was at the time in college, so that was like the perfect thing to do with spare time. So that's really how I got there. But I think that now there's this double-sided coin of like, yes, we have more information at our disposal, but it's almost like over information, right? And it's overwhelming to the point that you get stuck.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I broke out of that, was like, okay, I know that I needed to find something that was actually going to work for me and something that was taking care of me both physically and mentally and emotionally. Like that was clear because I was really in the gutter in terms of emotional and mental health and just had a really disordered relationship with food. And so then I was like, okay, well, I want to know more. And that's when I started learning and going through the certification. My first certification, I've had a bunch since, but that was like my first intro to things. And
Mm-hmm.
also I started working with a coach myself, which allowed me and expanded my mind to the possibilities and to another way that I was like, okay, so I don't have to starve myself. I don't have to punish my body with more exercise. And so that was really the two of the biggest turning points for me in terms of where I was headed.
Was it a health and fitness coach or what kind of coach was it?
Yeah, so I actually worked with a nutrition coach after
Okay.
I had got certified as a fitness coach. So I started to really like wrap my head around the fitness component and felt really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then still nutrition was just like so hard for me. And I was
Yeah.
like, I need help. There was a nutrition coach that worked at the gym that I coached at, and I worked with her, and that was honestly such a big game changer for me in terms of my mindset, as well as just the approach that we took in terms of helping you understand that you can enjoy, all kinds of food. There was no off limits, it was more so a holistic, balanced approach that I was really needing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just to go back for a moment, it sounded like as you were talking, the way that it was coming to me as what your experience is like, it's like, okay, I did all the things that everyone told me to do that I thought was what I wanted. It's like I got skinny. Now
Mhm.
what? Like I got down to this weight. I've mastered not eating the bread baskets. I've mastered running till I can't run anymore, and I'm still not happy. So now what?
Exactly. Exactly. And I remember that feeling so vividly. Like I remember standing in the mirror and pulling apart whatever was left on my body, which, mind you, was basically nothing. Like I don't even remember or know how I pulled anything off my body. You could see my collarbones, it was just like very unhealthy.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I got to that point where I was like, okay, I made it, but like, now what? like, what's next? And everybody, you know, told me how great I looked and how disciplined I was. And that was like a motivator for me, you know, to
Yeah.
hear that affirmation as to what I was doing and validating, you know, the behavior that I was doing behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
yes, you got that right you got that correctly, because that was exactly how I felt.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important to highlight, and I appreciate you sharing it, because I think that there's, myself included, like still so many of us who think that life's going to change when we weigh a certain amount. And it might, you know, right. I don't want to discredit the fact that there is fat phobia in this world, and there is, you know, a lot of harmful biases against bigger bodies. And, you know, you hear all the stories about, you know, roller coasters and airplane seats and just being treated a certain way at a doctor's office. And so, yes, there are aspects of your life that may change in losing weight, but the inner, the inner life may
Mhm.
not, right? Like how you think of yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you speak to yourself, you know, if you love yourself or not, like all of that might actually not change, and it's probably more likely that it won't. And for me, it's even at my smallest, it wasn't enough. I always wanted to be smaller. So it's like, where does it end? You know? Yeah.
Yep. It's such a painful process, you know, to go through all that hard work and get yourself to that point, and then to be, you know, yo-yoing and really what I wanted to mention too is like, yeah, it might have seemed like I was doing all of the right things, but also my body was so starved that it was leading me to, you know, having some overeating episodes when I was alone and by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't healthy, you know, it just
Right.
like, it didn't, and that was the thing. It like didn't make sense regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So part of me was like, something is not right, but I didn't know the magnitude at which it was like not right, you
Yeah.
know, at the time. And so, yeah, just being able to dive into that work myself and being able to get the support that I needed. I had gone to therapy a little bit at that time too, to kind of work through some of the relationship with food things, but it wasn't what it is now. Like I didn't prosper as I do in therapy now. Like it wasn't the same relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was like, originally I got sent to a nutritionist because they were like, oh, well, you clearly just like need help, like, you know, figuring out your nutrition. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, sure. So they went to the nutritionist and she's like, you already eat a lot of healthy food. And I was like, yeah, I literally eat like carrots all day long, you know, like I
Right.
don't, I don't need somebody to tell me what I should and should not be eating, because that's just fueling the fire.
Right.
So
Right.
even getting pointed in the wrong direction, you know, was like, okay, now what, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a lot of what we have to deal with too, is being sent in these circles of like, oh, well, this might help, or this might help, or try this or try that. And again, it's just that influx of information now that could have you trying a new approach every week and just feeling lost.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, it's hard. Because I hear you. There's such a blessing in how much information is out there and available now. And, you know, listen to a podcast, read a book, follow someone's, you know, body positive social media account. But there is still this, I think, big conflict between, you know, like, I don't know, like we're just, even from the time like you're in elementary school, like thinking back to like the pyramid of food, like it's so deep, it's so ingrained, it's so like, I don't know, it's really hard in my experience to unlearn for what I was taught for like 30 years. You know,
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
so frustrating.
And that's a lot of work that I do with clients too. It's like, okay, what are those thoughts or beliefs that you have? Where do they come from? Are they still serving you? Are they even true? You know, like
Yeah.
really unpacking a lot of that, because we have so many, like you said, just nuggets ingrained, or things people have said to us, or ways that our parents were around food that have now influenced our relationship with food. And then even thinking beyond that, the next generation, right? How we speak to our children and how they
Mm-hmm.
perceive food. And it's like, we could actually do a lot of work to make that better for them so they don't have to struggle with that if we do the work first ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And this is getting to kind of your coaching philosophy that I want to get into in a second. But before we do, you shared in the questionnaire that I send out, and you shared it a little bit here now, and I just would love for you to elaborate for a moment on what therapy does for you now. What was the prompt for going, just a little bit about your experience with therapy and what you get out of it.
Yeah, for sure. So my experience with therapy, like I said, started actually during the disordered eating phase, but that was not, I would say, a good start to it because I didn't feel any sort of connection. I also only had like 2 sessions with the woman because I was graduating from college at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I was leaving and there was no telehealth at the time. So I ended up just going off on my own and navigating life on my own. And then when life was pretty good, actually, for the most part, and I was just struggling more so with some self-limiting beliefs and also just kind of a lot of anxiety that I was like, I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to continue walking through life with this. I worked with one therapist for about 8 months, but I never felt like a really true connection. And then I realized that, it takes time to find the right person for you. And so I've been working with my current therapist for probably another 8 or 10 months or so. I don't think a full year yet, but she has completely changed my life and absolutely is just the person that I was meant to be with. Just she is someone that is able to meet me in those little baby Jenna days where maybe I was taught something or I perceived success in a certain way, or my feelings were kind of just like pushed to the side. Like all of that has now come out to this point where now I feel just so much gratitude for my younger self. And I even discovered like a box of mementos in my parents' house recently. And it was like, I wrote this letter to myself. And like, I think in the past, I would have been like, oh my God, this is cringeworthy, like so embarrassing. And I was just like, look at this girl with all this heart, like just so much admiration for her. And also just allowing me to understand, like, I've always been like that. And what a strength and a gift that is to lead from that place.
Yeah.
And so now I've kind of brought that back into my coaching practices and my business, right? Because I got really caught up about like, performance and how to get the business to XYZ and all the things that come along with that. And more recently, I just took a step back and was like, oh my God, I don't want any of this. Like, I want to be able to connect with women in a heart to heart space, to be myself, and to lead my business through that lens. And so that has been like a lot of the work that I've done behind the scenes in terms of therapy more recently and how it kind of relates to where I'm at now.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the letter you wrote to yourself was a positive, loving letter.
Yeah, I had a lot of funny ones in there. I had that one, yes, was a positive. I don't think I ever wrote, I wrote in a journal and stuff, and I had a couple of like journal entries, a lot of like song lyrics about heartbreak. That was like honestly the cutest parts, I thought, was like all the letters. I could have totally, I don't know if you've seen the movie To All the Boys I've Loved Before.
No, I've heard of it.
Okay, so
yeah.
it's about this girl and she writes these letters to all of her crushes every year in school, but she never sends them. Then they get sent out by accident, and then all the boys come back and are like, oh, I didn't know you had a crush on me. Anyway, that could have been me. Like I always wrote letters and just like, use song lyrics to like voice how I felt. And normally I would have been like, oh my God, so embarrassing. But I read them and was just like, oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah.
Like, look at that heart, like just so much heart. You could see it, as I was writing on the page. So that was like a really funny, but also really sweet experience, but all positive and more so just like, boy, you broke my heart kind of thing.
I'm kind of debating which way to share, because I relate. I certainly have the boxes of, and like was totally a song lyric girl, and like with all that little ex-boyfriends and crushes and things. And then I had a blog through college where I like detailed my dating escapades and things.
Oh, cool.
And that was a little bit sassier than it was sweet. But what's funny is that, and I think it's worth sharing I can't remember if I've shared this on the show yet or not, but over the summer, I went over to my parents' house and found like a box that I didn't remember that was still there of stuff.
Mhm.
And this is awful. I basically found, and as soon as I saw it, I remembered making it. I think I made it in college. I think it was freshman year of college. It was basically like, if you've seen Mean Girls, it was like a burn book, but like just about myself.
Oh gosh.
Like it was all pictures. I had like cut out pictures of myself where I thought I looked fat
Oh,
and like printed them out, put them
oh,
all in like pages of like copy pages, and wrote things like across the pictures and in the white space of just like, this girl is like, this girl meaning me, like this girl is lazy, this girl like is fat, this girl doesn't take care of herself, this girl, no one wants this girl, like awful things. And then like in the next few pages had printed out pictures of when I thought I looked good and when I thought I looked skinny, basically. And in the white space and across those pictures, that was like, what would this girl do? Like, this girl is happy. This girl is like, it was like so intense. And it was so intense remembering making it and not, I think now as an adult, like just like looking back and being like, oh my God, like the hatred
mm,
and like the shame and the guilt and the just like, and you know what, I don't know, like it's just like this whole like sphere of life is just like one aspect that feels like, this is going to sound like really self-indulgent, but like in most other areas of my life, I feel like I have a really great head on my shoulders.
mm,
It was this one aspect that was like, oh, we lost our way on that one. you
yeah.
know I threw it out. I remember coming across it in past years and like keeping it for whatever reason, because I think I still thought that I could like hate myself into just being thin.
Mm,
um and I did throw it out when I came across it this summer, but it was just like, it was so jarring, like,
mm,
oh my gosh, like you
yeah.
really hated yourself, like, I don't know.
And all consuming too, right? Like constantly thinking about that, or like that being, a constant process or wheel that you were kind of circling on. Yeah.
Yeah. And I,
Yeah.
like you said before, like the dissecting, like I'm remembering now, like I would like print out a picture and be like, and like put like a red arrow next to like, if I could like see a part of my face that was like fuller, or like a part of my arm that was like sag, like it was like really
Oh,
ridiculous.
oh, my heart hurts.
I know. I know, and I'm laughing. I have some laughs about it, partly because of discomfort, but also because, you know, it's mm, it's I don't know if like laughter is the right, like, it's not really what I mean. It's just like I've done enough work now to not be crying
Mhm,
as I
mhm,
tell that. And
mhm,
I've also done enough work now to not be like insanely just like furious, not at myself, but at whatever the forces at play were to bring me to that point. And when I say that, I mean like diet culture, like immature boys, gymnastics coaches, and like all the people that had an influence on that, and all of the societal messages that had a influence on that. Like I'm not as angry anymore, but yeah, I think so. Maybe like laughter comes out because like I don't really know how to feel about that at the moment.
mm.
Like it's not sad, it's not angry, it's not, certainly not content. It's just like, how do
Yeah.
I feel about that?
Yes. My therapist says when I start laughing, she's like, "You feel distant from me." And I'm like, That's basically where I am. I don't know where I am. I'm
Yeah,
not upset. It's almost like I've accepted it, but at the same time, I don't know how to how to sit with it or how to present the information that I'm
yeah,
sharing,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes. Okay. All right. So And the last thing I want to ask you about all of that before we kind of again get into what you do now is how does anxiety show up for you? How does it manifest for you?
Yeah. So it's very much behind the scenes for me. Like, I'm definitely more of an outgoing person when you meet me, but I'm technically very introverted.
Mhm.
But you wouldn't know that because I can have a conversation and be very upbeat. And so for me, it happens behind the scenes and typically just within like my thought. It's like all in my brain. I don't feel any sort of like body sensations. I don't
Okay.
feel heart racing. I don't get anything like that. And I've always kind of hated that about it because it wasn't visible.
Mm.
And so it's one of those things that you struggle with that other people cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is always harder to convey.
Mm-hmm.
And almost like I wanted validation from other people that like, oh, okay, if you had a physical disability, right, it's visible versus a mental struggle is not as visible. And so I had to work through that a lot, in terms of just like, okay, so this is something that I do deal with. Most people in my life who know me know that I have struggled with anxiety in the past. I've really gotten away from saying I have anxiety and
I know
not
it's
saying
hard.
it.
I
And
feel you on that. Yeah.
you probably heard me kind of not say that
Yeah.
on purpose because that is not my identity. It's an emotion that I experience,
Mm-hmm.
just like any other emotion. So I've kind of just understood it as that and allowed it to come and go as it needs to. And more recently, I've just been in a season of, like I said a little bit earlier, but just kind of like letting go, coming back to my heart and guiding from that place. And I've felt so much less anxious in my body, in my, mental health, in every place. And I'm like, wow, this is what I needed to do all along, is
Mm-hmm.
really like let go of pressure, of old beliefs, of how I wanted things to look in the business, of just this death grip that I had on things.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
reduced a lot of anxiety by just doing that.
Yeah. So as far as, it sounds, I know what you're saying, but I'm going to push you on it one more time.
Yeah.
Aside from, therapy, which I'm sure has played a huge part in that, how did you actually come to release and let go? Like, how? Like, what are the things that you do? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, someone's
Yep.
listening to that and they're like, that sounds great. How do I do that?
And if I was listening to this like 6 months ago, I would have been like, I don't believe this chick. How do you
Yeah.
do that?
I know. I know. I feel you. Yeah, I know.
So I get that.
Yeah.
So let me see. So I think that I've always been on a personal development journey. I've always just loved personal development. I've loved reading books. I've loved listening to podcasts. I've loved just doing all of the things to learn. And I'm really good at adopting other people's philosophies, at putting other people's strategies into place, and into basically just following what successful people have done. That's how I succeeded in my business. That's how I, just was successful in other areas of life. And then more recently, I was like, okay, this isn't working for me. Like, it honestly got to the point where I was just so tired of feeling anxious, of feeling like I didn't have what I wanted. I was searching for more in my business and in my life, but not from a monetary perspective, more fulfillment, more joy. And it got to the point where I just could not continue moving like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could have read all the things about how to reduce anxiety, how to do all this stuff, but it wasn't until that like part of my brain was just like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And physically too, like physically, I got to this point in my body where I was just like, oh my goodness. And this past year was just so interesting and so unique. For the first time, I wasn't really focusing on many health and fitness goals myself, and instead was focusing on doing some internal work. I noticed that I had some issues in terms of reoccurring hand eczema and some cycle issues. And I was like, I'm done. Like, I want to figure all of this out.
Mm-hmm.
That was my goal at the beginning of last January, 2022. And so alongside of that experience, I was able to like get myself to this point where my health was improving as well. Like, again, I was always very healthy. I ate well, took care of myself, worked out consistently. I did the meditations. I did all the things, but I still felt like there was a missing piece. And so doing that deeper internal health work, and it was 9 months so far. I'm not even done yet. 9 months so far we've been on this road. And as of yesterday, I just had my first mild and manageable period, like minimal cramps, like able to actually move about my day. That was not even a possibility pretty much at any point in my 20s. And I have no doubt that me letting go in October, this was like very recently that I finally hit that like turning point of like, I can't do this anymore. That release, as well as all the work that I've been doing on my health, allowed me to get to that point yesterday. And I was like, oh my goodness. So this is why I was saying, I feel like this call was actually perfectly rescheduled for a reason, because I just felt this sort of like release physically, mentally, and it's just been a really interesting process. So I don't know if that gives you, I think my biggest takeaway from this is that I don't even want to tell you how you're going to release. I want you to get to the point, hopefully before you feel completely like, I need to let go. I'm burnt out. Hopefully it's before then, but on your own timing and in your own like trajectory, whatever that looks like. Because if I kept following what everybody else was saying, how to manage anxiety, how to do these things, how to get healthy, how to do all the stuff, I would have never gotten to this place and felt such an ownership over it as I do now.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been talking about that a little bit on the show. Just sort of like when you're hitting that wall of like enough, whether it's physical health, mental health, relationship, whatever, you are so desperate for that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, here are the steps, take them, go, do, bye. And I've just really over the last few years have discovered the same, that it's like, yes, read the podcast, read the books, listen to the podcast, but it's like you take a little bit from each one to create your own roadmap. And that is excruciatingly painful to hear if you're in a place of desperation, if you're at the wall. But it is, I say it always to validate anyone listening, because inevitably, as much as you want someone's 1, 2, 3, 4 to work, you're going to wake up the next morning and it's not.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, just know that now Jenna said it, Christy said it. It's like, you're going to take something from it, but it's not going to be the be all end all.
Yep.
And it's frustrating, but it's the way it is. And I appreciate you trying to explain how, because I know enough to know now that it's just constant. It's constant work. And you sort of like wake up with that in mind. You do sort of just wake up one day and feel different. And it feels seemingly overnight, but it's not, because you've been working on it for so long. It's very hard to talk about. It's very hard to explain. So
it is hard to explain.
It is.
I'll give this analogy because it's something that I actually sent out to my newsletter this week about. So I have a weekly newsletter. It's called the Growth Notes. And the point is like little seeds along the way. Like that's my goal, is to just plant little
that.
seeds.
Yeah, that's good.
And my business is harvest coaching. So it kind of like makes sense. I also don't love like flowers. So it's more, I picture more like a garden in terms of like vegetables and things.
Okay.
Just to get the visual. But when we take these seeds and we plant them, that we're going to water them, we're going to nurture them, but they might not come to life for you in this season, right? It might be something that you pick up in a totally different context, in a totally different phase of life.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so beautiful and special about it, because then it becomes yours. Then it's unique to you.
Yeah.
And I think that analogy just kind of ties this concept together of you building, your own unique garden and understanding that, okay, these are little seeds that I'm planting, like things that just like really resonate with you. And you're like, oh yeah, that felt good. Like put that in your garden, right? Nurture that, save that. That's going to come to fruition in some way. So I think when you can think about it that way and understand that also, this is something I talk with clients about, is like, it's not that, there's something wrong with you. I think we often take and absorb a lot of the blame. Like, well, I couldn't do that process that so-and-so did that made them successful. So then it must be me. I must be the problem. And I want to encourage you to challenge that thought. And instead of that, like, actually recognize that you're not the problem. It just didn't work for you.
Yeah.
And that gives you the space to determine, what about that did work for me? What about that didn't work for me? And that's how you start to build together your own version of a healthy lifestyle or whatever you're working on. So that's the approach I take with clients too. It's like, hey, I understand. That's why as a coach, my toolbox is full of different tools for different clients. I don't know how to explain sometimes the work that I do because it's so unique and different per person.
Yeah.
So I have, of course, the things that I believe in and the things that I will stand by as a coach in the health and fitness space. But at the same time, I'm very flexible and open to other things, as well as, because the industry is also ever evolving. So there's going to be new stuff that comes up and new strategies and new tools that we learn through science and through experience. So as a coach, that's something that I really do like emphasize, is that your toolkit. And I heard this actually, this was one of my mentors had this recently. So basically there was new research that shows that if you have new tools in your toolbox, it's going to make you more successful. So as it relates to behavior change or any sort of change that you're trying to make. So if you have multiple tools, right, for every tool that you have, you're 2.3 times, I think she said 2.3 times more likely to be successful. So then if you just keep adding on to that toolbox, think about how beautiful and how much more easy and simple and successful just kind of come to you, because you'll be able to kind of decipher how you want to handle situations in different environments, or when life changes, or when this curveball gets thrown at you, right? You'll be able to kind of maneuver and work your way through that. And same goes for your healthy lifestyle, right? We need to have some flexibility in place and different tools to utilize. So that way you're never shutting your fitness completely off, but just kind of turning it up and down as needed.
Okay. I like that.
Sorry, I shared a lot.
No, I like that. The only thing that I would add to it, and only from personal experience, not with any expertise, is that you have to give yourself time to develop those tools. Like
100%.
you're not gonna have 100 of them tomorrow. Like yes. It takes time. Okay, so let's go there a minute. So your coaching methodology is mindset, metabolism, and movement. That's also the name of your podcast. Would you take a moment and like break each one of those down a little bit further and tell me a little bit more about each one and why that is what you've come to as your guiding light, so to speak?
Yes, for sure. So obviously, as we've been talking a lot about today on this podcast, is mindset, right? If you are not in a good place mentally, if you are making decisions for your health and fitness that do not feel good to you, if you are on a path that you just feel is unsustainable, if you're struggling with all or nothing thinking and getting on and off the wagon, like that's where the mindset side of things really comes into play. It's honestly my favorite component of all of the things we'll talk about today. And that's why I honestly reached out to you, because I was like, she focuses on all things mental health, and I take it from the health and fitness lens. And I just love that. So that's kind of the mindset component. Metabolism is really more so for women specifically who have maybe been overeating a majority of their life, and they think that that's what they need to do in order to lose weight. Very, very common to think, and it makes logical sense. Undereating. Yep.
Okay.
And it is true to a certain extent that it is true. This is actually true in science, right? Like the only way for you to lose weight is to be in a caloric deficit. So eating less food than you're bringing in. However, where this becomes a problem is women are often maybe on those chronic diets for a really long period of time. And that allows their metabolism to readapt to that lower intake. And then they're stuck like at 1,200 calories and they're like, I can't lose weight. I don't understand. Right. And so the process that I utilize is really working through re-optimizing that metabolism. So actually adding food back in to your body to allow you to be able to eat at a normal amount of calories for your body, and to pay attention to your hunger cues, to have more energy, to have better digestion. We focus on all of that. And that's really the metabolism component that kind of ties into that. And the last piece is movement, because we love to move our bodies. Our bodies are made to move. And so I do coach from very much a strength training angle, But I do encourage people to do all the things that they enjoy. So I also love yoga. I also like to do an occasional CrossFit class, like I like to run. I like lots of different things. And so as long as it has the strength training at the core of the training program, that's what I really help clients kind of focus on, because that's great for building muscle. That's great for being able to live a healthy life long term. It helps prevent diseases, especially for women, like osteoporosis and things like that. And it's also just such a big confidence booster. Like lifting a heavy weight is like so gratifying. It's like, wow, I can do that. I can do anything. So that is all of that. Hopefully that makes sense. What do you have questions for me on that?
I do. I do because as you know, as we've been talking about, this is like a thing for me right now. And the one thing that I've been having a lot of trouble wrapping my brain around, and I'm curious what you think of this, is, I've read the intuitive eating book, I've done the workbook, I've learned a lot about diet culture. I have looked back at all of the diets that I've done over the course of my life, exactly like you're talking about, like, totally messing up with my hormones and totally messing up my metabolism and the whole nine yards. And I've seen how often a diet has ultimately yielded a negative result because I gain it back or I gain it back more in the whole nine yards, the whole thing. Okay. So I am not comfortable in this body. You heard my show, like I'm more confident in it and I am more accepting of it, but it's not where ideally I'd like to live.
Mhm.
But I also now have like completely rejected the idea of dieting.
Mhm.
And so I don't know where to go because I can hear you that like you need a caloric deficit, but the idea of dieting is like F off. Like I'm done with that noise. And so what do you do? Like I don't know. I'm still so confused by this. And it's like we were saying earlier, like these conflicting messages and just I don't know. I'm just curious what you think of when you hear me say all that.
No, it's honestly absolutely valid feelings and makes 110% because again, I've been there before as well. And so it's like, how do I navigate this, but in a healthy way and without, falling into diet culture and the toxicity that comes along with that. And I think that the approach I take is pretty unique. Like I said, we would optimize all of the things. So just make sure that you are taking care of your body in all of the ways. And similarly to like what you said on your podcast, right? Like the weight is going to just kind of fall off, right? Once you've gotten to that point of a healed body, a continually healed body, right? It's something that's going to be worked on for a long time. As well as there's a little bit more. I love the concept of intuitive eating, but I also think that it misses a little bit of a marker in terms of how do you actually know how much food that your body should be getting? Like, how do I know what kinds of foods my body responds well to? I think that that's kind of dismissed in the intuitive eating approach. I have read the book as well, and I really wanted to wrap my head around it, but that component for me was missing. And so I actually take clients through the approach of we will get to intuitive eating. We will get to this point where you intuitively know what your body needs. But first, we need to create food awareness. And what I mean by that is we need to understand how food is made up, how different foods feel in our body, what foods give us energy, what foods do not do well with digestion. And the only way to do that is to pay attention to the foods that you're eating, which requires some form of tracking of some sort. And I know that like, whoa, people get really freaked out when I say tracking. But when I say tracking, this could be writing it down in a journal. This could be, right? And it's temporarily, right? That's what I tell all of my clients. It's just a tool that we utilize. Again, a tool in the toolbox, but it's not meant to be forever. I think what sucks is that we've all gotten so caught up in this, like, oh my gosh. And I felt the same way when I first started doing this approach myself. I was like, oh no, I have a really bad experience with tracking in my fitness pal. Like I literally would put 1,200 calories and like make myself hit that no matter what I was doing. And like, if I went over that, I felt awful. Like I understand the feelings that are coming from there. And for some people also, it may be way too triggering, but I do believe that so many people could benefit from that food awareness component and tracking and paying attention to their food, even for a little while. So that way, when it gets to intuitive eating, you know how to intuitively eat. Because
Yeah.
to me, the intuitive eating approach sometimes just feels like you are paying attention to, you're just like, what does my body want? And it's like, well, what if you don't know because you've never really paid attention to what your body actually wants? Like, I feel like there has to be a pre-work before you can get to that phase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does
Okay.
that make sense?
I hear that. And I want to clarify with you your form of tracking. Are we like, because of the tracking that I know is through a company where there's points, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you know what's funny is I never say the name because I hear other podcasters like not say the name, and I'm like, so I'll just follow suit. I don't really know why I do that, but um,
Everyone knows what you're talking
you know
about,
what I'm
though.
talking about. And the part about that would be triggering to me is like, and you could tell, I'm asking you to clarify how it differs with you, is that it's like the part that I would get so stuck in is like, how many ounces did I eat and how many this, like, because it's like, sometimes, yeah, sometimes I just pick up whatever's on the plate, or like it doesn't, like, I don't know, I just, it's almost like the anxiety of being so specific about it. Like, is it just like we're tracking, like, hey, I had these foods and I don't need to like put down, like, was it the size of my palm? You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm getting
Yeah.
at? Like, what does the tracking actually look like?
Yeah. And that's, again, this is where multiple tools come into play. So if you are somebody who, feels overwhelmed by like that specificity, then we can just pay attention to, let's make sure that you have protein at every meal today. Like, it can
Okay.
be as simple as that. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying?
Yes. Okay. All
So,
right. Okay. So
or
it's like a unique, it's even that is unique.
yeah, and it's just like, again, whatever feels best for the client and what they are able to commit to. Like, that's
Okay.
ultimately something that you can stick with. So if it's like, hey, I want to, if we do a food log, we notice and you track your food for a few days just so I have an idea of where things are
Mm-hmm.
at, then we can decide, okay, well, it seems like we're really low on protein and we need to, this is very common for pretty much 99% of the women that I work with. Protein is usually not enough. And so it's like, how can we work on building more balanced meals? So when you reach for, the pasta, how can we make sure that maybe we throw some chicken in with the pasta or some shrimp, and some vegetables, and then cook it with a healthy fat, butter, olive oil, whatever you want to cook it with. And so that's kind of the balanced meal approach, I say, is probably the most secondary common that I work with clients. But primarily, I do more of a macro-based tracking. So that's really focusing on proteins, fats, and carbs. But again, that looks different depending on what the client wants to work on. Maybe they just want to focus on protein. That's the only macro that they're paying attention to. Maybe the client wants to work on vegetables. That's something else that we'll pay attention to. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's like very unique in the approach. I will say in general, just the more specific that you are about it, it tends to be more successful. So if you are able to pay attention to the actual sizes, like 4 ounces versus 7 ounces, or 3 cookies versus 17 cookies, that is going to be
Yeah.
more accurate naturally, right? So there is always that caveat of like, okay, yes, we can take all these different approaches, but at the same time, we ultimately want to utilize those measurements to create the food awareness, so that way you don't have to utilize that anymore in the future, because you're like, oh, I know what like a normal size of chicken looks like, or I know like what a serving of rice typically looks like, or you can understand like how the plate is built out over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear that. I hear the 4 cookies versus 17. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? But I also think, and I think you would agree, that that's also where the mindset work comes in, because do you really want 17 cookies?
Exactly.
I'm not going to feel very good after 17 cookies. And you know, I went through all of that already, where it's like the complete sort of restriction and shame
Mm-hmm.
around food. I went through the whole period of time where it was like I was literally like, screw it. And like ate all the things, and then
So have
got
I.
to a point where I'm just like, yeah, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't
No,
need to have 17 because I can have another one later if I want it.
exactly.
Um Okay. All right. It's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky, tricky, tricky. It is. It is
It is.
tricky.
It is.
It's hard because it is so unique. But I do appreciate the food awareness because something that is like I've lived now a lot in the mindset portion
Mhm.
for the last while, and something that I do always still struggle with is a lot of the foods that I know of from my years of dieting or just from like following someone on social media is like a lot of the foods that are deemed like healthy with air quotes like actually don't agree with me like, and so
Yeah.
I get really frustrated because you know I don't like, I'm not vegan. I went through a phase, but like I don't love to eat a lot of meat, and I don't love like yogurt. Nah, doesn't work for me. Eggs, rarely. Like there's like a lot of foods that are like typically, fall into that nice little box of like, here's what we're going to eat that like I just don't feel good on. And so that food awareness part is, yeah, that's hitting because I don't know, I don't know what
Yeah.
else to try. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay. I could go on for days. Oh my God.
We love it.
Oh my God. Okay. So, all right, Jenna, if, you know, there was a message about your work that you'd put on a billboard in Times Square, like what would it say? What do you really want people to know about who you are and what you do?
Wow, this is a very challenging question because I've been in this phase of like, I'm more than just a health and fitness coach. I'm more than a nutrition coach, And it's like, how do I put what I do into words?
Oh.
So I have been marinating on this myself. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'll give you the best that I can. So I think that I really just love to help women find a healthy lifestyle that they can consistently commit to and that feels empowering to them, that allows them to choose and make decisions that are empowering, that are not making them feel guilty or making them feel bad or any sort of shame. So really removing a lot of that and instead building that confidence around food and building that self-trust that you can be around those cookies that you said I need to remove from the house and allowing you to feel confident and stronger in your body, but also understanding and accepting that body image will also fluctuate like any other normal human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be days where you don't feel great in your body, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the approach that I love to get
Okay.
clients to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of sums it up.
Okay. All right. And I guess lastly, is there anything about your work or anything that you would have wanted me to ask you that I didn't think to, or anything that we might have been missing from this conversation that you think is really important to share?
There was when we were talking earlier and you had kind of equated how a lot of this work is related to mindset, especially around like eating 4 versus 17 cookies. This is really where I'm talking about like empowered decision making, right? If you want the 14 cookies and you thought about it and you were like, this is what I need right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm making this choice out of a choice of this feels good for me and I'm not going to feel guilty about it afterwards, then go ahead and have the cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really, what we're trying to do is understand how your brain makes decisions, right? All of our decisions are very much automatic throughout our lives. Like, pretty much everything we do is automatic. So, to put some intentionality into that decision and to understand, why am I making this choice? Why, when I'm out with friends, do I feel this pressure to order XYZ? Or why, when I'm home alone, do I feel this sensation to kind of go and overeat? Or why do I feel when the day is finally winding down, I want to turn to food? Like, starting to understand really why this relationship with food exists. And we often discover that it's related to something that maybe happened years ago, right? Or maybe it's just a way of our lifestyle that we live now that can ultimately influence those decisions that we're making. And so really working on like, okay, here are the decisions that we're making now. versus let's back it up and understand the process that goes on while you're making those decisions, or even it's often really before the decisions are even made. What's the event that's happening? What is the trigger that's leading you to make that action or make that choice? What are the stories that you're telling yourself along that? What are the habits that are associated with this, right? So there's a lot of different components that we can back up to, and this is where the mindset piece comes in. And so really understanding, I think, that there's nothing wrong with you, right? There's nothing wrong with you. It's more so just understanding why am I making these decisions? Where are they coming from? Are these decisions that I actually want to choose for myself, or would I prefer to choose something else?
Mm-hmm. That's really good. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Jenna, thank you so much. This was excellent. Of course, I will link in my show notes where everyone can find you and learn more from you and potentially work with you. So I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I just love this conversation. It flowed so easily and felt so warm and fuzzy. And I know the difference when I'm editing, when I go back and listen to the show for edits. I sometimes, re-listen and go, oh yeah, that felt good, And then sometimes I listen to it and go, ooh, you got a lot more work to do there. And normally the body ones are like, yeah, you got a lot more work to do there. But this one, I don't know, it just felt different. And I really felt like we had a nice flow, and I hope you felt the same. I am so grateful to Jenna and her willingness to share so many intimate details around her healing journey. And I want to point out and ask you, did you hear her say, not exactly these words, but self-development is not a one-size-fits-all? I did. This is your reminder, once again, that you have to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that to make the journey your own. The other point that ties nicely into the one-size-fits-all situation is think back to the garden analogy that Jenna shared. I absolutely loved this because I think it's completely on point. She talked about when we plant a seed that we might not see the growth in this season. And I'm, not a botanist, and so don't take this literally by any means, but perhaps you plant a seed in February, but it actually needs the sunlight of May and June to grow. And yeah, that just hits. It helps describe what I've been trying to describe, what Jenna and I tried to describe on the show, of how you just do all of this, air quotes work. You do it all, and then feels like seemingly overnight something changes. And that's exactly it. You're planting that seed and you're nurturing it and you're feeding it and you're watering it and you're doing the things. And you don't know when it's going to actually pop out of the ground. Just feels silly talking about it this way because I don't really have any idea what I'm talking about when it comes to plants. I'm not a person that keeps plants alive very long. But it does make sense. It makes sense as an analogy. And the point was so well made for me. And Jenna, that is sticking with me till the end. Anyway, I also want to share that, I talked about my personal burn book that I made, and that was like pretty heavy. That was pretty dark, I thought. But as painful as it is to recall, it is also where I have to give pause and mentally applaud the progress, because I cannot fathom doing anything like that today. And I gotta tell you, as like dark as it was making it at the time, like putting myself back in that place, it really was pretty easy. It was easy to do, It was easy to see how much I don't know, like it just didn't, what am I trying? It just didn't feel like a stretch. Like it was just basically taking everything I think about myself and putting it on paper. And so, although you have heard how excruciating at times this process has been for me and continues to be, I hear that. I made a personal burn book, and I go, gosh, all right, you are making progress, So I have to be so thankful that I have the opportunity to rehash all this crap in my life on the show so that I can remind myself of the progress and where I've been and how far I've come. And if you're listening to this and wanting a similar experience, because maybe you don't have a podcast, get a coach, get a therapist. Even, I know that that's going to be like, hey, I don't have access to those things. Write them down. These are all the things people tell us to do, right? Journal. Say them out loud and record them. Like, you don't have to air it as a podcast. But if you've got a computer, you've got a phone, you can actually record yourself talking, and just hearing yourself say things out loud is really powerful. And I never fully realized it until I tried it. So anyway, if you want to talk more about that, hit me up. Hit me up on social and email. I don't know. Let's chat about it. I can help. All right. Thank you, Jenna. You're a wonderful human being. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.